Welcome to Conversations Cafe. I'm your host, Cheryl Nason, and it's indeed my pleasure to introduce you to the guest that's right here on the set with me, immediately to my right. She has this wonderful first name. It's Cheryl, and she spells it exactly the way that I do, Cheryl Kerr, and we're going to talk about her wonderful book, See Ya. Cheryl, great to meet you and great to see you.
Thank you.
Sorry. I couldn't resist the play on words.
It's very nice to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This is a wonderful book.
Thank you.
Let's tell our viewers a little bit. Let's give them a thumbnail sketch and then let's chat a little bit more about it.
Okay. The book is a daughter searching for her father who died very suddenly, and she did not know who he was when she went to bury him. He was a man with a military history who had a lot of secrets, and it comes from when you very suddenly lose a person, standing at the grave and being unsure who you're trying to say goodbye to, which was actually from my life, that particular event. So I wrote a book to take me through that journey. And in that book, I went back into history and used World War II as the setting, and took a man who had escaped from a German POW camp here in America. There were 383,000 German POWs captured by the Americans in World War II, prisoners of war here on bases all around the United States. But it was easy to escape, and this man did so. And so the journey involves from 1944 through 1996, when the mystery is solved.
Now this is based, how much of this is based on your life and the research that you did about yourself and your own history, and how much is fiction?
It is an interesting composite of the two. Losing my father very suddenly caused the situation to come up. We did have a German man appear in our front yard who happened to know the address of the street I had grown up on, which was very odd because it was a very obscure place. That, I think, is what got my tie going back to the German history. And I did grow up partially on an Air Force base that had been a German POW camp. The events, the circumstances were there. The story, the German POW, and the secrets that I developed for this colonel who was not at all close to his daughter that she needed to find answers to, were all made up. And it was kind of interesting. As I began to work on the book and talk to people about World War II, we had probably 200 people who would come and find me at parties or talk. And I think it taught me to listen very well to that generation. They had marvelous stories. Many people say that they only recently began to talk. It took them 50 to 60 years to get what was probably the most visual, vibrant, even if it was the most hard experience of their life, to where they could talk about it, the things that they had seen. But people would come and talk, and I would end up with stories from people I didn't even know, and it would be, Cheryl's writing a book about World War II, and we would have many veterans come and talk, and I took all those stories down and just used pieces. But it's fascinating. Everybody's war story is different from everyone else's. And then we went to Europe, and I actually saw the bunkers and saw the bomb damage, and we went to Eastern France and Germany and England, and you get to touch it and see it and realize that it's still there. People there live among those pieces all the time, and it's kind of fascinating. It makes it very real.
What was that experience like for you? I mean, to most of us, war is still out here.
Yes.
Unless you have served in one of the wars and been right there. You got to come in after the fact and sort of an observer, but I just think that you would sense all of those people and all of those historical events around you. Am I right?
I think so. The initial gathering of the work, the history, was brought. I have an uncle who told stories to me when I was growing up. One story was about when the war ended. He was 19 and helped liberate the prison camps. And one day in May they were fighting, and the next day he was driving a Jeep along the road and it was silent, and he pulled off the road among these little blue flowers, and he looked up, and the castle that is the model for the castle at Disneyland is there on a cliff. And he told me that story when I was perhaps 10 or 11. And somehow the juxtaposition of World War II and the Disney castle stayed in my head. So that is in the book. everybody talks. It's trying to assimilate coming home to a quote-unquote normal life and going back to the war. So when we went, we took our daughters, who were at that time 18 and 20. And at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, they've left the scarring from the bombs on the outside walls as a monument to what happened so that people won't forget. And I went up and I put my hand on the wall.
Wow.
Because you're touching what was taken apart.
You're touching history.
You're touching history.
Yeah, you really
And we
are.
did the same thing in Colmar, in eastern France, and we visited with my husband's extended family, who lives in a little village and was occupied by both the Germans and the French at different times. And you listen to people talk about what it's like under the different regimes. We actually got to talk to Marie-Jeanne and Edouard about what it had been like. They're in their 80s now. So we got to tie a lot of personal experience to things that aren't just written on a plaque or in a book, and it made it very real. That's part of what bringing this book forward is about, is just because it was the 1940s, it's still a part of life today. Time is not separate events, it touches each other.
And giving it breath sounds and a heartbeat, if you will.
Yes, and realizing that lives do cross each other, rather like the theory of 6 degrees. You know, things are related to each other in ways you don't expect. And the more we researched, the more I found that different pieces of things went back across each other in time.
And that's exactly what happens to your characters in the book.
Yes, they cross 60 years and their lives cross, even though some of them never know each other.
What made you start writing?
I love to write. It's I'll get a sentence in my head and I'll write it down and the words just flow.
Have you always been that way?
A large part of me has, I think. I find a peace and an inner joy in writing that I don't. It's just part of who I am. I think it's a recognition. And I write a little differently. I write the first sentence and the last sentence of the book, and then I stitch them together.